Chaos, a state of total confusion with no order. It is a word that aptly describes the Badlands region that comes out in the series Battle Angel Alita. A region that has somehow escaped the tyrannies of Zalem, but in so doing, because it has no rules or laws, is in a constant state of disarray and destruction. But like the phoenix that rises out from the flames, two characters come out from this region and play a very important role in the story. And so today I would like to talk about these two characters that come out and influence the main character of Alita. So what's up, people, and welcome to another episode of Battle Angel Alita / GUNNM. And for today I would like to talk about the Bard and the Warrior and the Tale of Chaos. But before I do that, I would like to give my standard spoiler alert. So, if you have not read up to the end of the original series Battle Angel Alita, then there may be a good possibility that you should turn off this video. The reason I have kind of delayed in talking a lot about the original series is because of the fact that I feel that a lot of the story will actually come out in the movies if there are any sequels. And because of that, if you have only seen the movie and do not want to be spoiled by any possibilities in the sequel, then I would suggest that you may want to turn off this video, because I do have a feeling that these two characters have a high probability of coming out in future movies. However, if you don't mind and would like to know more about the original story, then please join us. Now, the reason I have decided to talk more about the original series, although it may potentially spoil some of the things that come out in the movie, is because I realize that there are a lot of viewers that only have read the original series. And I've noticed that because I have focused a lot of my attention on the Last Order series and the Mars Chronicles series, I have kind of left out a lot of the listeners and viewers from being able to listen to some of the discussions. And so today I do want to go back to the original series and talk about this. So with that said, I think you know where you fall with whether you want to continue on or not. And as always, please watch at your discretion. Okay, so the Bard and the Warrior, Radial Chaos, and Lord Den. I think I do want to say that I kind of hesitated in bringing this video out because I feel that these two characters are two of the most complex characters that come out in the original series. They have many facets to their persona, and I think many readers interpret them in a different manner. And so I do want to apologize right from the beginning if my interpretation of these two characters are wrong from yours. Then I do want to apologize for having a different interpretation, but I do want to give my version of how I view these two characters. The other thing is, considering that the Badlands story takes place in an area that's extremely desolate, there is a tremendous amount of philosophy and character in these stories. I do feel that these stories provide a tremendous amount of depth, and they do grow the main character in a significant manner. And so I do hope that Robert Rodriguez is seriously considering keeping the Badlands section in the movie series, because I do feel that they do play an important role to the main character and her journey. And if you are going to leave the Badlands section in, you cannot do that without making sure that you bring out these two characters. So Radial Chaos and Lord Den are two characters that have a very similar objective. They both want to see peace and tranquility come to the city of Iron City, and somehow that city gain independence from the tyrannies of Zalem. But the two characters have an extremely opposite form of execution towards that objective. For Radial Chaos, he would like to see peace and tranquility through the knowledge of peace and tranquility. He wants to show examples of how peaceful and meaningful life is through his songs and his nightly speeches. And it is true that his voice has become one of great popularity amongst the people, not only in the Badlands, but also in Iron City. And they feel that his speeches, his comments, give great depth to how people may give hope to a much better future. However, if Radial Chaos's voice is the one that gives hope, it's Lord Den's actions that often give a lot of reassurance to a lot of people that this hope will really come to reality. You could think of Lord Den as a terrorist, as many people in Iron City do, and the majority of the people in Zalem do. But you could also think of Lord Den as a freedom fighter, revolutionary, if you will, that is trying to overthrow the tyrannies and bring freedom and peace to the people that are under oppression. And so for those people, as much as Radial Chaos's voice gives comfort and hope, it is Lord Den's action that makes them feel that that hope may be realized. And of course, as readers of the comic, we get to see these two characters through the eyes of Alita. And of course, the Alita of that time is the one that is a tuned agent that is kind of reluctantly working for Zalem. And so we get to see how she interprets these two people in a different manner. Radial Chaos is the one that Alita probably becomes closer to in terms of her moral convictions. But it is Lord Den who Alita's actions are a lot closer to mirroring. Alita is a lot closer to being that of Lord Den than she is of Radial Chaos. And though she does appreciate and understand his desire to bring peace through peace, she also understands that, especially in the world of Zalem and Iron City, it is almost impossible to do so because the environment is so chaotic. And so she looks at Radial Chaos as a character who has a very strong conviction, but an improper strength to bring that conviction to reality. Whereas Lord Den, she feels, is a lot closer to bringing that reality forward, but she questions the morals and the methods in the way he brings that objective about. And so she kind of looks at Radial Chaos as, yeah, please try it, but I am not sure if you will be able to succeed sort of feeling. Whereas Lord Den, she feels, may actually succeed, but to some extent, that is what threatens her It makes her afraid because of the fact that the cost and the consequences to bringing peace may be way too high for even her as a person to accept, let alone as an agent for the city of Zalem. Now, as far as personality is concerned, both characters' personalities are representative of their base persona. So Radial Chaos has a personality that you might think of as somewhat like a child, a very innocent sort of personality. You could call it naive, you could call it innocent, you could call it immature. But there is this feeling of softness, and because of that, you're not exactly sure if even the character himself takes things to the level of seriousness or dedication that is necessary to bring the desires around. Whereas Lord Den, possibly because he has experienced a lot more and weathered a lot more, is a lot more mature, a lot more philosophical. But with that comes a severe anger management problem. Yeah. That guy, yeah, he needs to see somebody, get some mind treatment done because, yeah, he has some severe hate issues. And it is because of that that his objective is driven with so much passion. But that passion, of course, comes at a cost of him almost sacrificing his humanity and his morality to bring those passions about. And so, yeah, once again, Alita takes all of this where she feels close to Radial Chaos and befriends him, but at the same time, really doesn't take him as serious as I think he wants her to. Whereas with Lord Den, as much as she does take him seriously, it's in a much more confrontational, adversarial manner. And so, considering the fact that these two people both want the same objective, it is these opposite sort of persona and the way they bring it about that brings a completely different action from Alita. And since each knows of the other's existence, they are somewhat in conflict with each other all the time. They don't really bring it out in a physical sort of conflict, but you could see the disagreement in philosophy in the persona of each of these individuals towards the action of the other. And so these two individuals, through their opposite extremes, play a very interesting characteristic to the dilemma of the conflict between the people in the Badlands versus the people in Iron City and Zalem. Now, if that's all there was to these two characters, then I wouldn't say that they would be one of the more complex characters in the story. However, there are quite a few more other points that I do want to bring out that brings about the multifacet and the complexity. And before I do that, I would once again want to say, since these points are potentially extreme spoilers to the story, if you don't want to get spoiled by either the comic, if you're going to plan to read the original series in the near future, or if you feel that this part of the story will come out in the movie, the cinematic universe, then I would suggest that you may want to stop this video now because these points are quite revealing. But if you don't mind, then yeah, please continue on. Okay, so the first of the major reveals that comes out in the story is that Radial Chaos is a psychomeddler, a person who has extreme psychometric powers. Now, psychometry. I don't know how to pronounce it, but that is a capability where if you touch something, you start learning about the past of whatever it is that you touched. From what Radial Chaos says, each one of these objects has some sort of electromagnetic signature of its past. Whatever it experienced leaves a residue on the object. And so when Radial Chaos touches it, he actually can, if you want to, hack into that signal or sync into that signal and be able to experience everything that that object experienced. So everything he touches with his bare hands gives him the ability to learn from it. And when it is a person, his psychometric powers becomes seriously enhanced. You could think of it almost as mind reading, but in fact, he's not really reading the memories of that person. And in fact, because his senses are experiencing the residues of what that person experienced, he is actually reliving that person's experience. And considering the fact that he is a relatively empathic person, his personality is relatively open and sensitive to these reactions, he becomes extremely attached to the feelings that he experiences. And because of that, that may be the reason why he has such a soft side to him, that he felt the pain of a lot of the people that he has come in contact with. And you know that it is pain rather than pleasure most of the time because of the fact that, hey, this is Battle Angel Alita we're talking about. This isn't, the Sound of Music or something like that, And so you have a understanding that the people who he has come in contact with are most of the time in oppression and depression. And because of that, probably what he has experienced is a severe amount of pain through his capabilities. So his capabilities you could think of more as a curse than a blessing. And because of that, and because he has experienced so much through the other individuals, and possibly even through the objects that he has touched, that it probably opened him up more to trying to relieve those pains through, kindness and peace. And you could understand why he wants a desire for peace, possibly because there is a personal selfishness to that, and that he just doesn't want to experience that much pain any longer. And of course, what is interesting is he is the first person who learns in the comic series about Alita's past, because when he aids her, he relives a lot of the experiences that she has. And through him, we learn that Alita's name previously was Yoko. And we also learn that she has had an extremely colorful and painful past. And since this is Radial Chaos, who always wants to try to cure that pain, even for other people, he becomes very attached to Alita. Almost to the point where, man, dude, you're starting to become a stalker, man. He falls in love with Alita for all the wrong reasons. And of course, Alita wanting to be close to him because of the fact that basically he has once in the story saved her life. And also she agrees with a lot of the things that he does. Cannot take him half the time seriously because of the fact that he is coming on to her all the time, and so it's kind of a comedic point of the story, and it gives a little bit of lightness to all this kind of controversial psychology that's going on. Now, what is interesting is the one side advantage that comes out of being psychometric is that he learns things at an extremely fast pace. You could think of it as, the data that's downloaded into Neo in the Matrix. Well, in this case, it's almost a biological download. And so everything he touches becomes part of him. So if he, contacts a surgeon, he gets to learn surgeon skills. If he contacts, a martial artist, he gets to learn part of that martial arts. And so what you find out is Radial Chaos is a very capable person, and because of that, it is what gives him the ability to save Alita through his medical skills and his engineering cyber skills that he literally never had he not contacted probably people of great experience in the past. And probably one of the people with the greatest biological and cybernetic experience is something that comes up in the next reveal, which of course is his father. Radial Chaos tells Alita that his father is Desta Nova. Of course, which immediately raises a major wall between Alita and Radial Chaos. And because Radial Chaos is somewhat innocent to the world, as much as he is close to Desta Nova as a son, there is kind of this lack of knowledge, his ignorance to the horrors that Desta Nova does, which I'm not sure exactly how that is. If he touched or came in contact with Desta Nova, you would think that he would experience the horrors. But there is something with regards to that, which I'll bring up later, why he doesn't experience the horrors that Desta Nova had, inside, locked in him. But he does potentially learn a lot of the skills from Desta Nova, and that may be the reason he was able to save Alita. And of course, being his dad, Desta Nova in turn, I think does care for his son. There is a scene, I can't show the majority of the scene because of its intensity, but there is a scene where Desta Nova is proud of the speech that Radial Chaos is giving in a nightly, if you want to call it a podcast. But yes, I think Desta Nova does care for his son. But considering that we're talking about Desta Nova, I'm not sure if anybody ever wants to receive the care of this person, because he cares for his son in the way Desta Nova would care for anything, which is a seriously insane sort of situation. And because Radial Chaos does have that psychometric power, which I think Desta Nova knows, I think he becomes even more fascinated with his own son. And there is a point where Radial Chaos mentions that he is not even sure if he is a real human being, and that he's not sure if he has his own soul, or his persona is just made up of the mishmash of all the experiences that he's received, throughout his life. But of course, from Desta Nova's side, you could understand why Radial Chaos may say that, because of the fact that, I think Desta Nova has had a significant influence in the things that Radial Chaos has experienced. And because of that, you can understand maybe why he has become even more empathic to the, fighting of oppression, considering the madness that he probably experienced under the hands of his father. And in fact, of course, even during the part of the series, you see a part where his father lovingly lets him experience the madness of the world because, of course, from Desta Nova's sake, madness is just another form of knowledge. And it's a curiosity that sometimes he himself cherishes. So he decides, of course, to let his loving son experience that for himself. And my gosh, when he made his son, directly jam his fist into the brain of those complete mentally insane people, I was like, oh my gosh, that was one of the most disturbing parts of the original series. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, Radial Chaos's soul always gets personally fused by anything that he experiences because he experiences firsthand everything that person has experienced. So can you imagine your own soul being fused with those of homicidal maniacs, of rapists, of sadists, of sociopaths, all of these people? Yeah. That was a seriously disturbing image, and you could see just the excruciating agony that Radial Chaos experiences under that condition, while his father laughs lovingly to his son at knowing that he's learning all about the greatness of the universe. Now, of course, we don't really know who Radial Chaos's mother was, and considering how knowledge Desta Nova is in genetics, we're not even sure if Radial Chaos was born from a natural childbirth. But I do feel that he is not an empty vessel to which his psychometry created his persona. I think he did have a persona of his own. And I think that is best personified or best represented by the final reveal. And that is that he does have two personas. And the reason why I say that it's probably not something that was synthesized by Desta Nova is because of the fact that Desta Nova himself didn't realize that Chaos had this sort of split personality. And because of that, I do feel that this is his real persona. His two personas are his real core personas. They may have been enhanced and modified by his psychometric powers, but they are his of his own. And of course, the reveal is that Radial Chaos's other persona is Lord Den. And by learning that, you start understanding this whole situation, because this is basically another Jekyll and Hyde sort of story. You often see it in many literature, including a lot of mangas and comics, and probably in the Western comics, the most notable is that of Dr. Bruce Banner and the Incredible Hulk. And like Dr. Banner, Radial Chaos does have to come to terms with the fact that there is this monstrous other being within him. But the difference between a lot of these other comics or stories, including Jekyll and Hyde, is that these two personas can simultaneously exist. And it is through their interactions between one another that you see the conflict in his own persona. You're actually seeing real time the inner conflicts going on between these two characters. Because since Dr. Desta Nova basically gave him that ability to project out that second persona onto a cybernetic entity, a body, and by doing so, giving it a separate, a person, a human identity of its own. Radial Chaos was able to literally confront himself in the Badlands. Now, of course, when Radial Chaos finds out about this, since he himself didn't know that he was Lord Den, then it almost breaks him down because of the fact that his philosophies of how he executes to the world beast objective was so different that he wasn't sure if he could live with the fact that he himself was the one that basically did the things that he personally could not accept morally. And in fact, one of his closest comrades was killed by the agents of Den. And so he comes under an extreme guilt factor that he himself was the one that killed his comrade. But in fact, of course, since this is a split of a personality, similar to a lot of these other sides, without the knowledge of him being Lord Den, there was no way he could control that other character. And since that character split apart, then there really was no ability for one of the personas to be able to control the other. The other was not a subordinate of the first persona. Radial Chaos's persona, in his personal body as it is, isn't the host persona, and Den is a secondary persona. They're both just as much Radial Chaos. It's just that Radial Chaos prefers to bring out that softer side of him. And so Lord Den, which is equally as much Radial Chaos, kind of stays in the background. When Desta Nova gave Lord Den the ability to become his own personal character, that's when Lord Den got the freedom and the ability to basically go wild. And so Lord Den, finally reaching a freedom, was able to express his objective in his own manner. And since he was locked away in Radial Chaos's mind for such a long time, not being able to accomplish his objectives in the way he did it, he felt that Radial Chaos, he expressed and treated Radial Chaos with disdain because of the fact that he never felt that Radial Chaos could accomplish the objectives in the manner that he was doing it. And so you have the yin and the yang, the light and the dark, and they're both sides. And unlike Alita, who has to confront it within himself, Radial Chaos is one of the few characters who can confront himself outside of his own person. And so this makes this character very unique and very interesting to watch because both Den and Chaos are completely self-contained identities, and yet they are the part of him. If you were to explain it in kind of Freudian terms, basically Radial Chaos is the superego while Lord Den is the id. And because of that, basically, although they are somewhat complete in themselves, they have the strengths of each side, but also the weakness of lacking the other. And so they fall into the two extremes of one being a complete pacifist while the other is a complete aggressor. And the conflict that they have during the Badlands arc is something that Radial Chaos eventually has to come to terms to before he can become the complete person that he actually is. And of course, the catalyst that helps bring him back together again is Alita. and basically the situations that are going on in the world, because the world isn't going to wait for Radial Chaos and Lord Den to come to terms. And Lord Den is so focused on defeating Zalem and destroying and burning that city down into the ground that he absolutely refuses to fuse back with Radial Chaos. It's only due to the situation that he has in the story where he sees his defeat that he finally gives in to what he would call his own character death. And through that, of course, Radial Chaos can finally come to terms with his darker side. And what is interesting is when he fuses the two together, then of course he has to accept the sins of the other, the weaknesses of the other, but in so doing he also gains the strength and the advantage of the other. From that point on, Radial Chaos finally gains the strength and the abilities that Lord Den had, the strength and the courage to actually move along and to be able to take down obstacles in front of them. Whereas Radial Chaos's side brought out the compassion, the caring, and the ability to take the objective to where it is when compassion was necessary. In fact, at the end of the story, although Radial Chaos and Lord Den individually failed to be able to bring Zalem and Iron City to a source of peace and tranquility, it is when they are together that he finally has a chance. And of course, with the help of Lou Collins, he decides that he will take it upon himself to see if he can unite the two cities and somehow bring peace in that situation. If there is opposition, he will fight it using his persona as Lord Den. But if there is required a compassion and negotiation, then as Radial Chaos, he could always bring that forward. And a little bit of a side note, I kind of promised that I wouldn't talk about anything in Last Order. But I will say one little thing, which is, it is because of this persona that he could bring both sides out, that he became a valuable ally to Vector. And just like Vector, who was able to give Radial Chaos the opportunity to bring his objective to reality using the resources and the strength that Vector had, Radial Chaos, I feel, gave Vector a different sense of purpose, a sense of humanity, a sense of ideologies that Vector himself somewhat lost along the way due to his survival instincts. And so the two together, I feel, became a very interesting team in Last Order. And with that, I will not say any more, but I do find this character very interesting. And he does help Alita move along further because of the fact that the actions that he did separately and eventually the help that he gives to Alita once he comes together as a single person gives Alita the ability to move forward in her own personal conflicts. Anyway, that's about it for this video, and thank you very much for listening and watching. And I'll continue on with more Battle Angel Alita videos in the future, and I hope you join me at that time. And until then, happy comic reading, happy manga reading, happy anime watching, happy movie watching, and as always, Jan, I stay with you.